Good morning. Can you hear me?
Is he wants to decolonize. Remember, he did his masters in England, and after gaining knowledge from England, now he wants to decolonize ELT in Oman. And thanks to the efforts taken by Dr. Ali, ELT in Oman is now witnessing a great change. It is undergoing transition. What he has done is he advocates self-dependency in Oman's English language teaching, and because of his efforts now they have their own indigenous teacher training centers in Oman. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome our keynote speaker. Welcome, Dr. Ali. We have another eminent speaker with us today, Professor Vinod Balakrishnan from National Institute of Technology, Trichy. Vinod Balakrishnan sir is a man of varied interests. He is a practicing poet. I like this adjective, gerund adjective, practicing poet. Motivational speaker and reviewer of books. And of course, he is a yoga enthusiast which is the secret of his sound health too. He was a fellow at the School of Criticism and Theory at Cornell University, USA, and he is also the general editor of the 12-volume Encyclopedia of World Mythology in Malayalam. When I went through his profile, I had a doubt whether he is a professor or a poet because I found both equally present in his profile. We have such a versatile personality with us today. Sir, on behalf of our English department, I extend a warm welcome to you. We have three persons to chair our sessions in our seminar. Dr. Tamil Mani from Nehru Memorial College, Puttanamatti, Dr. Satya Sai, Raja Durisingham Government Arts College, Sivagangai, Dr. Rishi Williams, St. Xavier's College, Kotai, and on behalf of our department, I extend a warm welcome to our chairpersons also. A dream moment for our department because we have been planning for a conference, and that too for a long time we have been planning for a conference on ELT, but somehow our efforts did not get materialized in the past. But thanks to the consistent efforts taken by our head of the department, Dr. Shobana, we are able to see this day, or at least these 2 days, totally dedicated to ELT, today and tomorrow. So on behalf of everyone gathered here, with a round of applause, I would like to welcome our head of the department. He is also the organizing secretary of this seminar. I welcome our UG head of the department, Dr. Suresh Frederick, as we all know that the very name inspires all the researchers in English literature. Dear friends, I also congratulate him on receiving the Best Researcher Award from Bishop College for the My sincere welcome goes to all the teachers of Bishop College and the teachers from other colleges too. I'm sure that your participation will augment the quality of this conference. Welcome, dear teaching fraternity. Of course, I extend a special word of welcome to all the student participants of this seminar from other colleges as well as Bishop College. Dear students, I hope that this seminar will be a great opportunity to all of you to choose your future academic pursuits. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who is going to participate in this seminar, and I also take this opportunity to thank the IT support, welcome and thank the IT support who are extending all kinds of support in the conduct of this seminar. Welcome and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the warm welcoming address. For every arrow that reaches its target, every stone that hits the mango, and every man who attains success, aim is the commonality. And so do we have an aim and a purpose for this virtual conference. I now invite a respected head of the Department of English and the Dean of Arts, Dr. S. Shobana, to make us understand the concept of this conference through her concept note.
Respected and renowned professors who joined online from abroad and from NIT Trichy, Professor Ali Al Isa, the full professor of Critical Applied Linguistics, Department of Curriculum and Instruction, College of Education, Sultan Qaboos University, Sultanate of Oman, and Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan, Professor of English, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Technology, Trichy, and the rest of the speakers, Dr. V.K. Karthika, from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, NIT Trichy. Dr. Ilam Bharati, Research and Consultancy Committee Coordinator, the English Language Center, University of Technology and Applied Sciences, IBRA, Sultanate of Oman, and Dr. Khadija Al-Balushi, the Academic Program Senior Specialist, Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, DG Private Universities and Colleges, Sultanate of Oman. The staff who gathered here and joined online, research students, and the students of MA program, MA English and English Language and Literature program, are seated here in the hall. Good morning and welcome to the conference. Professionalism in English Language Teaching, Concepts, Applications, and Implications. First, let me register my deep thanks to our principal of the college, Dr. Paul Deyabaran, who, owing to unavoidable circumstances, was not able to join us today at the inauguration. He passes on his greetings to the participants, especially the paper presenters, the speakers, on behalf of the college, the management, and staff and students of the Department of English. I must thank him deeply on behalf of the students and staff of the Department of English. But he has always been a huge support, a pillar of support that he is. Has never said a no to any such an academic exercise that we plan. And so, big thanks to him. And let me also thank Professor Ali Eliza, Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan, Dr. Kartika, Dr. Khadija Balushi. From the depths of my heart, it's because, as Dr. Dhanamal put it, it's a dream come true conference for us. We've never run a conference of the sort in the studies and practices of English language teaching, though we have a paper called English language teaching at the UG, PG, and the couple of students who are pursuing the PhD programs in ELT2 here. And so it's a great day for us, a big day to be running a conference of this sort. So in that respect, a profound thanks to all of them who said an instant yes. This is no exaggeration. When I wrote to them, they just said yes. And I should very specially thank Dr. Ilam Bharati, who's alumnus of this department and a former colleague too, who initiated the collaboration between Oman and Tiruchirappalli, between the colleges, universities, and the offices of education in Oman and the colleges and universities of Tiruchirappalli particularly, and the rest of India too. He has been helping us with a lot of papers to be sent for the conference, for the presentation. And so he initiated this collaboration by way of letting me know certain people to bank on as the best ever known speakers on ELT as a practice. And so my profound thanks to him especially. Coming to the concept, I should acknowledge that the idea of professionalizing teaching of English as a second language, as a theme for the conference, was born out of a mail conversation I had with Professor Al-Ali, who was concerned. I quoted a battle from his mail. Although professionalism is an increasingly debated theme in ELT, unfortunately, it is a rarely investigated topic in the third world countries. Unquote, I, on behalf of the academic community who are gathered here and online, thank him profusely for the directions he guided and offered in the form of the sub-themes you see listed out in the brochure. And I'm sure his anguish was a result of his experience as a teacher, as a researcher of English language there in that part of the world, and also as a manager and administrator of ELT, that part of the world, and elsewhere too. Obvious. Professionalism in English language teaching as a challenge or a requirement to be addressed in the 2 days conference has stemmed from the threats posed by the non-professionals in countries where the language is taught as a second language. Hence, should not the call be addressed pragmatically in the forum through a study of how or whether the teacher training programs prepare the teachers of English in various countries where it is taught as a second language for the challenge of teaching with excellence, and what we can do to further professionalize ELT. When one indulges in an exercise of that sort, one can easily realize that he or she cannot just intellectualize anything there, but would rather be engaged in reality checking all the time, assessing the effectiveness of classroom communication, especially overcoming the barriers of intercultural hurdles. Because you and I know, teaching a language had been for a long time in India, the traditional English syllabi, and other such nations, nothing more than a mental transportation into the culture of that language, or to put it in historical terms, an indoctrination of the culture of the language. Defining professionalism literally refers to people being trained or being skilled, or having the education of a high level, or a particular expertise. In our context today, teaching of English. The idea, what does it mean to be a teacher professional or a teacher of English as a foreign language, can embrace developing the appropriate linguistic competence, acquiring relevant content knowledge, developing a repertoire of teaching skills, acquiring contextual knowledge, acquiring specialized cognitive skills, learning how to theorize from practice, or the other way around, how to practice from theories, developing a learner-focused teaching includes being technology savvy too. Thus, what does it mean to be professional? The question can be addressed from the point of view of the learner or the teacher, the material or the method, and the teacher and the research papers we receive subscribe to an interesting range of ramifications with respect to the learner, the teacher, the material, the method. And I gather from the titles of the talks that you're going to listen today and tomorrow, they address more the challenges or threats to the very idea of professionalism the very conceiving of the term professionalism, owing to various reasons, including politics, politicization at various levels, meaning deliberately or materialistically and consciously deterring the relevance of teaching English in a cultural context, and technology innovation, of course. Reflections on professionalizing research practices to be addressed by Dr. Khadija Baluchi contributes to and culminates the whole lot of reflections on the subject. Professionalizing research practices is a kind of a continuum and also a contribution, an overture to understanding what it is to be professionally trained as a teacher. And so I welcome all the participants here in person present and those who have joined online, and especially the paper presenters, the speakers of today and tomorrow, and the staff of the department and other departments, and the staff, teachers who joined from elsewhere online. So the 2-day celebration over a very practical thing. So the 2-day exercise will be more a feed for what it feels like for a teacher to reality check, and not just a piling of intellectualizations. So most welcome all of you, and then may we get started with the sessions. Thank you.
Many thanks for presenting a lucid concept roadmap. The principal has excused himself as he has another important meeting to attend to. So we move on to the next item on the agenda. To enlighten us on the concepts of professionalism in ELT, concepts, applications and implications, we have amidst us Professor Ali Al-Iza, a full professor of critical applied linguistics at the College of Education, Sultan Qaboos University, Oman. Dr. Iza holds an MA in TESOL and a PhD in applied linguistics from the Universities of London and Queensland, respectively. He has extensive experience of almost 30 years in teaching English at different levels and for different purposes. He has published and presented widely on English language education policy, planning, and teacher education. He is also a recipient of several national and international awards and recognitions for his research and teaching. Dr. Iza will now open our eyes to a fresh perspective on the topic, using research to achieve democratic English language teacher professionalism in the Sultanate of Oman. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Probably I should start by thanking the members of the panel for their speeches, their opening speeches today. I should also thank everybody joining us today virtually. I was really hoping that this would not be virtual, would be in presence, in physical, but then the COVID-19 seems to be giving trouble to everyone, although it is phasing out now, which is very good, but we still need to be a little bit more cautious here. There are people already with masks in the audience, as I can see, so keep it up, ladies and gentlemen, for your safety. Well, for me to be a keynote speaker for today's, probably from what I've understood, the first ever conference to be hosted by Herbert Bishop College on ELT is definitely a big privilege. To be called to speak before everyone here today, out of those so many, probably thousands, if not millions of ELT specialists around the world means a lot to me. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. But then what this shows is that the relationships between Oman and India have gone really far. And today's conference is just demonstrating how we can take these relationships, which are very, very old actually, to the next level, and keep taking them to the next level, keep improving them and escalating the whole thing, and probably make the most out of all that together. So thank you very much indeed again. Probably I'll do something a little bit more to do with culture with you, ladies and gentlemen, today. I said good morning, but maybe that's not enough. So I probably should go with namaste or namaskaran to everyone. And I can see some names of some Muslim people there. So I will also go salam alaikum to the Muslim people. Try to be multicultural here if possible. And let's hope it works with today's topic as well, which is very universal, to be honest. Probably it's time to share the slides with you and kick off with our talk. So can everyone see this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's clear, yeah?
Yes, sir, the screen is visible.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you can see, this is the title for today's talk. Before I start, probably I should say that this is the very recent of my research works on critical applied linguistics in Oman. But then it says in Oman, but then it has got those implications worldwide as well. That's why I chose to share it with you today, because you will see that there is a lot here to be benefited from as far as the Indian context is concerned, inshallah. Research, democratic ELT, professionalism, absolutely bombarding words, bombarding terminology. But let's see how we can bring them all together, unite them under one roof, and then see how they all connect and how they all can serve teachers and teacher trainers, probably even policymakers, administrators, and students to improve ELT in Oman and beyond. So let's get down with business now. Or maybe first things first here. I would like really to thank Bishop Herbert College, and this is official now, and more specifically, Sabana Swamiraj for, I mean, she spent the past few months really in touch with me, back and forth talking together to be able to put up the whole thing before you, ladies and gentlemen, today. So thank you so much for BHC and for Sabana specifically here for all her effort. Also, I would like to dedicate this very humble talk today to all teachers, students, and probably very underprivileged, very overlooked group in the society, parents, included or excluded from the planning of ELT in Oman, India, and elsewhere. So this talk is dedicated to them all today. All right, why this talk? What is it about? You will ask, definitely, because you saw the title, and as I said, it is full of loaded terminology when we talk about applied linguistics, or even take it beyond and escalate it and talk about critical applied linguistics. This is what the talk is about today, basically. It's about decolonization, resistance, challenging, emancipation, empowerment, awareness raising, awakening, and attainment. Now, I know probably you've started to reflect on the history of India. India went through some torrid times being colonized by the Brits for decades and decades. And this is what the great Indians did. People, your spiritual father, Mahatma Gandhi, and many others, to get India decolonized. In Oman, I don't think we have still reached this stage. Therefore, I will be bringing all these together, pulling all those strings together today to see how we can put up a very rarely researched topic and see what effect and impact it can have on all of us. Now, how does the talk achieve all this, all those words which appear in bold blue today? Let's see how we can achieve this together. First, the talk will be shedding light on the lack of democracy in Oman in general, Omani ELT system in specific. We will link the two together because whether we like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot, and I stress, cannot separate education from politics. Everything today is politicized: education, business, agriculture, medicine, you name it. Politics has got a powerful hand in its planning and implementation. So we will see today how we can really discuss the lack of democracy. And not only that, we're not going to stop there. We will try to also suggest solutions to incorporating democracy in Omani ELT and probably the society at large. The talk will expose the socio-political games and tricks my government, unfortunately, has been playing to prevent teachers from developing into democratic professional teachers. We've got thousands of ELT practitioners in Oman, Omanis and beyond. But the number of Omanis is definitely increasing by the day. However, it's not happening for them. So much frustration, so many complaints. There's nobody to listen, there's nobody to support. Research is probably the lifesaver here. The talk will also suggest solutions to help those teachers develop as democratic professional teachers. And the solutions, many of them, if not all, will be pretty innovative, creative, critical, and quite radical. The study has got implications for similar contexts worldwide. As I said earlier, India will come on the top of those contexts. Many other developing world countries, if we have any participants today from other countries, they will see the resemblance, they will be able to relate to all that. All right, let's begin by framing the issue first. Democracy, goodness gracious, what a huge word, much used, rarely understood, unfortunately. So let's see what we have to say about democracy today. Definitely universal human value. Everybody deserves to live and act and behave democratically. It's a right for everyone. You cannot deprive people from being democratic. You cannot deprive societies from being democratic. You simply cannot wipe out democracy. On the surface, if you can achieve this, but you cannot do that in the minds of people, in their souls, and in their spirits. But then democracy is very complex and very demanding. And interestingly enough, it has got its own discourse and ideologies. It's not a value-free terminology. Actually, it is value-laden very loaded. It's not an easy thing to understand and analyze. But today we will try to tame this together. It's also pretty ambiguous and disputed. You will see many people, many researchers, many authors, many politicians, economists, and so on and so forth talk about it from their own perspective, analyze it, and peter it out in their own ways. But then at the end of the day, it's a beautiful terminology, and we all like to celebrate it in our own right, in our own way. It's fascinating. Democracy is simply fascinating. People in the developing world do not seem to understand democracy, unfortunately, and many of them, due to the political status quo they're experiencing, they would tell you, look, democracy is simply a myth. We don't believe it. We do not buy into it. It doesn't exist. Science fiction, virtual. Maybe that's not true. Today's talk will prove that this is definitely incorrect. Democracy is linked with nationality and nationalism, economy, advancement, social prosperity. All these things are directly actually connected to democracy. Democracy helps achieve all that for you. Democracy is also powerful enough to enhance collaborative learning, reflectivity, autonomy. Autonomy is freedom with reflection, freedom with logic, freedom with science, rationality, moral qualities of citizens. We all have our moral qualities, and they deserve to be shared and showcased. Democracy also enhances critical assessment of ideas. It makes you a critical thinker, helps you develop your critical thinking abilities and attributes. It enhances laws, and it enhances, last but not least, policies and the way they are implemented. Technological innovations today around the world, specifically social media, has opened up new avenues of democratic mobilization. People now think democracy, speak democracy, breathe democracy, eat and drink democracy, live democracy by the minute, maybe even by the second, using the social media, using ICT. It's fascinating. It's a huge leap. It's so important, so fundamental and significant to enhance democracy through the use of the social media. Now, probably narrow the focus down to democracy and education. You would now probably ask yourself, this is an ELT conference. Why aren't we still talking about ELT? Let me assure you it's coming, forthcoming, coming very soon. But we need to build this case together gradually, because it is a case study, it is action research, and it has to be built very gradually due to the multiple threads and concepts involved in its formulation. So let's see what we can say about democracy and education together in general terms. Well, democracy is influenced by education, economic development, and civil society. So you cannot separate all those together. Money, people, science, and knowledge. If you separate these three, things will collapse, will fall apart for you. You're not going to achieve what you have always aimed to achieve. Education is undoubtedly the most powerful tool for socializing citizens into democracy, enhancing their capacity to participate in consciously reproducing their society. We've got societies which have been produced for decades. No, maybe even centuries. But then that's not enough. You just cannot stop there and feel fully satisfied and say, okay, we're surviving. No, survival in critical education, in critical democracy is not sufficient. That should not be the aim, the target of any society. Any society that targets prosperity and advancement, that's definitely not enough. You need to be reproduced. And how can you do that? How can you achieve that? Through education. But then education has got to be directly linked to democracy. Otherwise, that society will never, ever be reproduced. Economic development and literacy are indicators of democracy. The better our economy is, the more, look, we won't say literate, that's not enough. The more critically literate people are, then the more democracy you're going to witness penetrating and coming onto the surface of that society. There's an implicit link, a link that very, very few people probably can see or notice, between education and educational policy and practice on the one hand, and these two and democracy on the other hand. Not many people notice this. Not many people understand this. Not many people probably endeavor to analyze this. Analyze it from different dimensions. Look at it holistically, construct it, deconstruct it, and then reconstruct it. How many people do this on a daily basis? Okay, on a daily basis, it's a big challenge. On an annual basis, once in a lifetime, I can assure you, very, very few. Probably there are people who do it, but then do they do it scientifically? Do they do it academically? Again, that's another big, huge question to be able to answer. Unfortunately, today, with neoliberalism taking over the world, these people have completely deformed democracy. Look at what they have been doing. They have been using it in a manipulative way, elusive way, and immoral way, simply to produce monopoly over policies. It's struggle over power because they want to exploit policies. They are achieving corruption in different ways. They are oppressing the rights of the people by manipulating democracy. And by manipulating democracy, they are also achieving wealth and power concentration, unfortunately. And this is happening all over the world, by the way. It's not exclusive and confined to the developing world. You see it even in the United States, which claims to be the mother of democracy. But then that's an illusion, that's a lie. That's a fallacy. The neoliberals also use democracy to control the minds of the people and sell their poor political and economic decisions to them. Because people lack critical thinking skills. They cannot think critically. Their education has not equipped them to do this. Therefore, you see the neoliberal politicians who adopt this dangerous and harmful ideology and philosophy, using democracy, actually abusing democracy, misusing it to sell their awful, their terrible, their rotten policies to us. And we tend to believe. Not only that, we tend to glorify and say, wow, these people are incredible. They're achieving more and more on a daily basis, whereas that's not true. It's a huge fallacy. But because we lack critical thinking skills, we tend to accept. We tend to feel happy and satisfied and contained with whatever is thrown at us. So let's make even a stronger link here between democracy and neoliberal education and see. Here we go. I started by talking about India throughout the history resisting the British colonization. Now look at that. Look at where the neoliberals have come and how they are dealing with teacher professionalism under their regime. They accused teachers at one point, that was during the 70s and 80s, of lacking professionalism. Look at how they manipulated the concept of professionalism and said that teachers are the direct reason behind the recession, inflation, and employment the UK was witnessing at that time. Therefore, they came up with their own version of professionalism, which is in the contemporary literature called managerial or organizational professionalism. And it is associated with performativity and control. It's all about controlling teachers so that teachers in turn control students, control their own thinking, whether they like it or not, control their own behavior. They only talk about performance that is very much related to copying, to parroting, rather than creating and innovating. Teachers under that awful regime were also required to follow a national curriculum. This is one of the innovations of that professionalism emerging from the UK 4 to 5 decades ago. Teachers were asked to provide evidence for whatever they did, whatever they produced, and then they would call that best practice. For God's sake, what is best practice? We've always known that teaching is subjective. Teaching has never, ever been objective. Teaching cannot be measured. What works in your context may easily fail in mine. You've got different students. You're teaching the first period, I'm teaching the 6th. You've got all female students. I've got all males. You're doing grade 5, I'm doing grade 10, and so on and so forth. Teaching is subjective. Even if we are both doing all females and are all grade 5 and are all the first period and so on and so forth. You don't know how I think. You don't know about my beliefs. You don't know about the agendas, about the ideologies, the philosophies, the expectations students bring along with them to the classroom. Where did all that go? Why can't we respect all that? This is what we're expected to do if we are professionals, true professional teachers. But then managerial professionalism deletes all this, comes up with benchmarking, with certain standards, outcome-based standards, and would tell you that your practices are the best. But then XYZ's practices are simply dreadful. Based upon what? Well, we've got a checklist. We tick, tick, tick. My goodness, teaching has been confined and reduced now to ticking boxes rather than discussing intelligently and creatively and arguing for and against what we saw and what we lived and what we experienced. Now, unfortunately, this directed teacher training agencies around the world, by the way, it's not just Oman or probably India, around the world, to adopt particular teaching approaches and training approaches where they are all centered around delivery and assessment standardization. Everybody should attend the same classes. Everybody should take the same tests, and so on and so forth. And then everybody would monitor the achievement of the students and how they are successful in competing. Learning has become so competitive rather than something noble, something with noble values, where people are educated, people are learning, people are raising their awareness, people are being awakened to some bitter realities. It has become part of economy, competing in the global market. You get an A, you get a job. You get a C, you don't get a job. But then hang on, those who got a C, do we know how we got their C? Why can't we investigate that? Why can't we move closer to those students and see what happened exactly? No, we're not doing that. Why? Because we had a checklist. We kept on ticking, and they did not meet the requirements. They didn't have so many ticks, therefore they're going to get a C. Absolute nonsense, absolute rubbish. But then this is what's happening these days, unfortunately. And then quality and accountability are measured accordingly. And this, to those neoliberals, is the only way to put trust back into teachers and teaching. Now, to support the Brits, obviously, their biggest allies, the Americans, have joined the bandwagon, joined the party, and they started collaborating with the Brits. And they have taken over since the 1980s. Not only that, but they added something to this. They reshaped the parents' thinking about their role and voice in playing a strategic role in planning education. They told them, well, look, take your kids to private schools, invest in education. Since when education was economized? Since when we pay to be educated? That should never be the case. Education has got these amazing noble values. It cannot be sold and bought. But the Americans managed to economize it, managed to brainwash the parents, and managed to drive them down that road, the road of investing in educating their children. Now, let's look at another aspect of today's talk, which is, I keep on narrowing the focus down, if you notice. Now we're getting to part of today's title, which is Democratic Teacher Professionalism. Let's see what we have under this section here. Now, in order to resist and challenge this rapid spread of neoliberalism, very, very harmful for everyone, different, free, liberal teacher educators started pursuing, introducing democratic teacher professionalism in the right sense, not in the neoliberal sense. They looked at it as a strategy to bash the neoliberal ideology, actually, and then put accountability into teachers' work back, facilitate advancing teachers' ongoing professional learning, and change initiation. Enough is enough with the nonsense marketed by the neoliberals in the UK and the United States. DTP is actually an ideology in itself, and it has got its own powerful agenda and discourse of emancipation and decolonization, as we will see in today's data that I will present very soon. It's also part of moral and citizenship education. How many of us, honestly, today, ladies and gentlemen, talk about moral and citizenship education? It is hardly done. It is hardly deliberated. People just talk about education in a vacuum. And they never want to mention anything about morality, citizenship. It's education to satisfy the politicians, education to satisfy the economists. That's why education today has lost its value, its power. DTP entitles teachers to work autonomously in professional communities of practice. This is the very recent in today's trends in training and educating teachers. Why? To challenge the dominant neoliberal policy, philosophy, ideology, call it whatever you want to call it, which has been dominant in schools and teacher training institutions. Simply to change the existing power, to turn the table round over their heads. We've got to challenge, we've got to resist, we've got to come up with an alternative today. And I'm talking to teachers and teachers to be, if some of you are still student teachers. And this is how it should be. Otherwise, we're not going to influence theory, policy, and practice. Things will remain the same. We will fail to reproduce our professional communities and societies. Moreover, teachers, teacher educators, and community-based social movements are creating alliances, very much like the alliance that the UK created with the Americans against us, the developing world, the third world countries. And we've got, through that alliance, respond systematically and empower remote, oppressed, and marginalized and excluded non-dominant communities. And goodness me, in India, probably you know this more than any other country. Exclusion, marginalization, remote places, people even cannot spell, even cannot write their names. This is what we need to target. This is definitely a huge concern for democratic teaching professionals today, because we need to influence that cultural shift. We've got to change the culture in our society. However, unfortunately, teachers first need to understand what the thick version of democracy means. To talk about thick automatically means we've got a thin one, which is not helping. Thick incorporates digital and networked media, and it promotes democratic engagement. I talked about this earlier. I hinted to it when I said the social media playing a powerful role in motoring and advancing democracy today. And if teachers cannot understand this, goodness me, they won't be able to utilize it in their classrooms and beyond. Teachers also need to be engaged in research-oriented programs. Teacher training programs should not be about lecturing, should not be solely about teaching. That's not enough. You need to engage teachers in research to get them to stimulate their reflection, their reflexivity, reflectivity on policy and practice. You want at the end of the day to produce, to prepare, to develop intellectual leaders, not any leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers are not leaders. Presidents are not leaders. Undersecretaries, heads of parties, these are not leaders. Believe me, if leaders lack intellectualism, science and science of politics, and science of their own field, criticality, then they are not leaders. They are manipulators. Probably this is what you have been waiting for all day. Let's now get down even to narrower business here. Democratic ELT professionalism. Let's see what we have down under this heading. Nobody can doubt that. Look at the literature and you will see it speaking to you. Strong relationship between language and democracy, and the centrality of language to communicate the ideals of democracy to your people and beyond, to the world. We just talked about the social media. Tell the world how Oman or India are faring with democracy, using English, using Hindi, using Arabic, it doesn't matter. But then we want that literacy to be more specific. We want it to be more political, more to do with democratic values, principles, and concepts. Otherwise, the transmission of that knowledge we are planning to work on will always be minus, will always be missing something, will never be complete. And people will scratch their heads and they will say that whoever is communicating those ideas has got to be better educated before disseminating his or her knowledge and sharing that with the world. Therefore, English language education is definitely a significant side for preparing democratic citizens. Not any citizens, ladies and gentlemen, democratic citizens. This is the aim of my research, the aim of this talk, and to be honest, a fundamental aim of this conference as well. However, unfortunately, English language education, look at that. Again, the Americans and the Brits has been commodified and controlled by these two people, especially with globalization now invading everywhere, taking over. This restricted teachers and students' autonomy, freedom with reflection, freedom with science, freedom with logic. With regard to manipulating, changing, resisting, and challenging the curriculum, instruction, and policy. Therefore, teachers need new directions. Now, we need to agree on this conclusion, at least for this part of the talk today. Teachers definitely need new directions in training and a meta language. What is that meta language? One which is critical, which is radical. One which is more to do with ideologies, with power, simply to challenge and resist neoliberalism and show it that there are reformers in different parts of the world, even including the developing world, who can change the status quo and improve it and make it better, more livable, more lovable. So the rationale and significance of my study. English in Oman is important actually for modernization and nation building. People learn it for multiple purposes. We have more than 500,000 Indians in Oman. A large proportion of those people work in teaching, in schools and higher education, private, public, and they know what it means to be educated in English in Oman. People learn it for multiple purposes: pursuing higher education, acquiring technology and science, acquiring cultural mobility, economic mobility, economic gains, interlingual communication, traveling abroad, speaking with those who do not communicate in Arabic, and so on and so forth. So many purposes for learning English in Oman, very critical for every Omani. Therefore, what the government tried to do was to launch what they call the basic education system in 1998, around quarter century back. Some of you might be familiar with the basic education because that was an initiative launched by your spiritual father, Mahatma Gandhi, long time ago. It's value education. It's amazing. That man wanted to decolonize India. All respect, all glorification to the Mahatma Gandhi. Bravo. What a fantastic leader. This is what he managed to do. He introduced the basic education system. However, in Oman, we imported that from you, surprisingly enough. We don't import so many things from the developing world, but then the BES was imported from India. You might wonder why, because our former Sultan was actually a student of one of the advisors of the Mahatma Gandhi. And he brought that with him. He imported it. And he asked the Minister of Education, because the system, the political system in Oman is a one-man show. The Sultan runs business and the ministers only implement. So that was imported from India and transplanted in the education body of Oman. But then what did the Omani neoliberal government do? They economized the BS and aligned it and harmonized it with the job market needs. They detached it from all those noble values and principles. And this, unfortunately, caused cultural and ideological problems to all Omanis. Not only that, but in 2014, quite recent, 8 years ago only, our manipulative Minister of Education, who's still in power, unfortunately, used manipulative neoliberal discourse and talked about employability and economic development and quality assurance and monitoring. What she tried to tell us, the Omanis, is that by economizing the basic education system, Oman will achieve employability 100% rate, will become one of the top countries on the planet, will achieve everything that it has always dreamt of achieving. Wow. Selling it to the people, yeah? But then, when you look at the history of Oman, since 1970, when Sultan Qaboos, the former Sultan, took over, this is what it has been. Absolutely poor history. We cannot find original and imaginative strategic solutions to planning our English language education. But not only that, we have an awful reputation, dreadful reputation of being self-marginalized. We import packaged, ready-made solutions from other countries. Look at us. We imported the basic education from India. But then that is only one tiny example. We have been importing for the past 52 years, not hundreds, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of those packaged, ready-made solutions from the West, more specifically, unfortunately, and failing to implement them. Oman, actually, those who are unaware, and why should you be aware, has been a de facto British colony, actually, since 1959 until today. Don't believe who tell you that Oman is a free country, free politically. Not true. Absolute nonsense. We are still a British colony. And what we did, unfortunately, we imported a lucrative teacher training program from the University of Leeds, a prominent university in the UK, in 1998. What a disaster. You will see how that program caused extensive damage to English language teaching, teacher education at the school level very soon. Now, when we try to connect this to research at the College of Education where I work, Sultan Qaboos University, we will see, unfortunately, that because our teacher education supports neoliberalism and neoliberal principles, it has not allowed the supervisees, the researchers, student researchers, to go critical, to go radical in their investigation and try and find critical solutions to the multiple problems of ELT we have in Oman. So what I try to do, being a critical applied linguist, a radical mover, a rebel actually, academic rebel, my aim has always been to prepare intellectual critical thinkers capable of using scientific discourse. I want them to speak science. This is the discourse they need to speak so that they can meaningfully participate in a democratic society. They need to be aware of the discourse you need for democracy in order to be able to converse with other educated people and convince them that this is how it should be done. Or those who know little about democracy, educate them about how it should be done. Therefore, what I did was to direct my thesis supervisees to use radical democracy, to build alliances with teachers, students, and parents against neoliberalism that has been dominating our education for the past 52 years. What is my research question for today? I'll keep quiet, I'll let you read it. I'm assuming you're absolutely quick readers and you are already done and through with reading that. So let's see more about our method today. What do we have here to justify, rationalize what I'm doing as an empirical, data-driven research? It is a critical qualitative content analysis study, actually. If you look at the literature, they hardly talk about critical qualitative content analysis, but then I'm adopting this because this is what the study is going to pursue today. What I did was to go for 9 state-of-the-art M8 theses completed between 2018 and 2021 by 9 of my supervisees, my previous students. This will be the source of data for this study. All those studies were actually completed under my supervision. They all adopted social constructivism and a case study approach, which myself I'm also adopting today as part of my reflexivity and reflectivity. All those theses took a phenomenological or emancipatory action research, or actually both together, combined the 2 approaches together to their data analysis. You can see, highly critical. Now, looking at those 9 theses, this is what I managed to come up with. 3 main themes emerge from the data analysis. Let's look at those 3 themes. What are they? This is number 1. We've been talking about policy practice. So bridging the policy practice gap. Number 2, we've been talking about second language teacher education lacking criticality, unfortunately. So the second theme is critical second language teacher education. Last but not least, we've been talking about exclusion, decolonization, marginalization, disempowerment. Therefore, now we're going to talk in the third theme about participatory continuous professional development. How we can get the teachers to participate in those programs and in developing themselves professionally. So let's move on to the first theme. Findings. Theme number 1, bridging the policy practice gap. Let's look at the findings now after analyzing that data. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Education did not provide teachers with a framework for curriculum evaluation. And this resulted in a gap and miscommunication between curriculum designers and teachers' plans and comments regarding curriculum implementation. A disaster. Teachers are unaware of what they're doing. They lack the proper knowledge. They're doing it for the sake of doing it. There's nothing scientific to support it here. This resulted actually in a mismatch between the BS, being value education, curriculum philosophy, and the teacher's teaching notes. They couldn't see until today, the vast majority cannot see the rationale behind the basic education. They are still questioning why BES? Why did we import this? Why is it imposed upon us? What do we want from it? It's a guest that is least wanted in our house. Simply, they cannot see the rationale behind it, the philosophy, the ideology, and you cannot blame them. So, a few years later, the Ministry of Education prepared what it called the English Language Curriculum Framework. Fascinating. But then what did they do? Did they share it with the teachers so that they educate them? Because that document, it is imposing. However, it still lacks a few things. But then there are other things which teachers, if made aware of, can use very well. However, that document has been kept away until today from all English language teachers. When you analyze it in light of the literature we discussed earlier, you will immediately understand that the MOE is trying to monopolize the policies here, concentrate power in the elites, the minister herself, her undersecretaries, the director generals, and so on and so forth, and force changing teachers' professional identities. What a shame. No, what a disaster. Moreover, the Ministry of Education used its failure. It has been a failure over 52 years, admittedly enough. Its shortcomings, its self-marginalization to blame teachers for lacking teaching competence. Look at any interviews with any politicians, any elites belonging to the Ministry of Education. Ask them about what is happening. And this is documented even in research, ladies and gentlemen, in Oman. Why are students underperforming? They wouldn't think a minute about that. They would immediately utter and tell you, our teachers are awful. Our teachers are bad. Our teachers are incompetent. Our teachers don't know how to do the job. Yeah, right. But then, it is your teacher training which prepared them this way. Not only that, you have been hiding stuff from them. They've been absolutely marginalized, excluded. You've been taking all the decisions entirely solely, and then expect them to be aware of how to do it, how to implement the curriculum. That is very unfair. That is very rude, very brutal. However, now, 2 of my supervisees, due to my direction, my guidance, this is what they started to do. Fascinating. They brought these facts to teachers, students, and parents' attention. regarding teaching listening and reading respectively. Al-Jabri did something on listening and Al-Rawahi did something on reading. They included those three groups. They made their voices heard in policy implementation. Why? They wanted to expose the tricks, the socio-political, the dirty socio-political games played by the MOE in Oman, the product-based pedagogy that has been promoted by the MOE, the managerial professionalism that was transplanted by the University of Leeds throughout those years. Both researchers actually wanted those three groups to develop as critical reflective practitioners and critical thinkers, beautifully enough, and understand the role of critical pedagogy in creating democratic citizens. How many of us, ladies and gentlemen, talk about critical pedagogy these days? How many of us actually have heard of this? Very few. I advise you strongly to educate yourselves in this. That's the way to empower people. Again, those two researchers also wanted those three groups to trust teachers. Teachers have not been able to trust their colleagues. Students have lost trust in teachers. Parents have lost trust in teachers, thanks to the neoliberal MOE in Oman. Simply because these people have lacked being intellectual leaders. They couldn't understand that learning English has got multiple values. They don't see it. And that the BS offers value education. They're totally unaware of it. Nobody has awakened them to this. Again, both researchers wanted those three groups also to demonstrate how civil collaboration can actually facilitate nationalism and economic advancement. By teachers, students, and parents collaborating together, you can make sure, you can be absolutely certain that the status quo will change, will improve, will be taken to the next positive level. Now, to improve on things, Al-Ma'mari came a couple of years later, and what he did was to follow into the footsteps of these two researchers, and he conducted a workshop to his fellow teachers in his school, which is about 400 kilometers in a remote area away from Muscat, the capital. They are all grade 9 teachers, and he did something on collaborative strategic reading, which is a fascinating, progressive, humanistic approach to teaching reading that is not included in the curriculum framework prepared by the Minister of Education, unfortunately. He wanted to help his colleagues to see the following: that communicative teaching of reading can influence students' chances to meet the job market requirements, reduce unemployment, obviously. That second language teacher education can facilitate bridging policies, practice gaps, and to put quality and accountability back into Omani English language teachers' work. It's not through neoliberal policies and philosophies. No, it is through professionalism, democratic teacher professionalism, which Al-Ma'mari pursued. Now, our second theme, critical second language teacher education. 2 years back, Al-Saidi, one of my supervisees, found that the vision and mission of the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, which I belong to, and the Master of Education program at my university, SKU, was witnessing a mismatch between the program and the theories that are actually outlined there. It was outdated, pretty old, lacked criticality. The content, the delivery mode, pure lecturing, pure spoon feeding, and this actually affected students' beliefs. Students who attended that M8 program could not see the relevance, again brainwashed by their teacher trainers. This prevented them from developing as leaders capable of reflecting critically on problems existing already in our English language education system and then be able to propose solutions to those problems. That woman, Al-Saidi, also found that the College of Education at SKU, look at that, imported the academic accreditation from the United States of America. There we go, self-marginalization, colonization, not only to force and perpetuate certain knowledge selection and delivery modes as imposed by the MOE. Now, this clearly tells you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is an implicit conspiracy, unfortunately, between the MOE and the second language teacher education program in Oman. My goodness, what a disaster. And marginalize and oppress teachers' expectations. This is what she found. Teachers were absolutely shocked. They came with certain expectations and they exited with a heartbreak, a total heartbreak. Nothing met their expectations at all. Nothing updated, nothing practical, nothing pragmatic. And this directly affected their professional identities. Instead of being reformers, intellectuals, problem solvers, they continued to be the same lousy teachers. Al-Hinai, a year later, adopted a local, experiential, strong version of teacher autonomy. That woman was another amazing example of a democratic teacher trainer. She not only facilitated a paradigm shift from teacher-centered to student-centered, but she also exposed the normalized hierarchical schooling practices and bureaucratic constraints as instilled by the University of Leeds program, unfortunately, over 10 years. This program, ladies and gentlemen, trained over 25% of the ELT force in Oman. And you can imagine this percentage going back to the field with those rotten ideas and causing all that damage to our ELT system, causing all that demotivation, causing all that lack of confidence. So Al-Hinai actually wanted student teachers to start to critically reflect on professional dilemmas they were facing during their teaching practice. They were attending actually their last semester, which was fully dedicated to doing their school-based practicum, teaching practice experience. She wanted them to see the damage managerial professionalism has been causing to their cooperative teachers who were actually pushing and enforcing textbook-based teaching, teaching for the test purposes, trying to tame teachers to become test slave, textbook slaves, which is obviously a principle that was introduced by the University of Leeds program over those 10 years. Al-Hinai also wanted the participants to reflect on their use of technology. Interestingly enough, her thesis was conducted and completed during the COVID-19 outbreak. Therefore, she took that golden opportunity to demonstrate to those 6 student teachers how technology can be used here to reinforce ELT ethics and values and advanced and motor ELT in schools. Because teachers in Oman are not trained to use technology in their teaching. That's why when we shifted to online teaching, the teachers were witnessing an absolute catastrophe. They couldn't handle it. The vast majority couldn't deal with it. She also wanted her study participants to challenge the authority of the cooperative teachers who were pushing for textbook-based, test-based pedagogy. They were actually, those people were watchdogs over student teachers' total adherence to the mandated textbook and teaching for test and pursuing. Al-Hinai was trying to pursue decolonization. What she did was to pursue critical action research to decolonize her student teachers and prepare them to be critical thinkers, intellectual leaders. Excuse me. Now, theme number 3, participatory CPD. Let's see what we have under this theme. Excuse me. Now, Al-Awfi and Al-Bahri, respectively, found that actually what happened around 7-8 years back, the MOE initiated what they called Specialized Institute for Professional Training of Teachers, the SIPT. Instead of preparing those teachers to become humanistic progressive teachers, what they did, they continued the traditions of the University of Leeds, managerial professionalism. So what those two researchers tried to do, they tried actually to bring to the attention of everyone how that place, which cost multi-millions, was nothing special, was absolutely nothing new, nothing different, was actually an agency that simply perpetuated controlling teachers' minds and thinking and looking at students' performances, basically, rather than students' knowledge development and learning. And not only that, but to also instill the outcome-based education and product-based teaching. The implications have been oppressed teachers' voice, basically. Teachers had no voice. Those who joined the SIPT, that institution, were not allowed to think. They were spoon-fed. This is in-service teacher education, which is not very different from the pre-service teacher education. Spoon-feeding, voice and thinking oppression, and failure to prepare students who can think critically. Now, while continuous professional development like peer observation is supposed to help teachers to collaborate, think critically, collaboratively, what it did was to confine teaching to a checklist. Business and industry-based tool. Checklists, ladies and gentlemen, if you are unaware, have been actually imported from the business sector. If you see an engineer or a foreman having a list in his hand, walking to one of the products, checking whether everything is done as per the requirements and the details, and then ticking those boxes. Perfect. That merchandise is ready to go down to the market. This is what we're doing with teaching today, with our teachers and students. We're checking a list without taking into consideration that we are dealing with people with huge minds, with hearts, with entities, with thinkers, with completely abolishing all that, unfortunately. This deprived teachers from developing as reflective practitioners. Those teachers became robots. They didn't care about their students' needs, their students' wants, expectations, philosophies, backgrounds, ideologies, interests. They started to look at ELT from the perspective of checking a list, finishing the syllabus, students performing and scoring high marks on their exams. Although those exams, actually all of them, without any exception, have always lacked validity and reliability. So what happened? Al-Habsi, inspired by the Omani Spring that was ignited in 2011, when so many professionals went out on the roads protesting against the regime those days and condemning the situation at that time, so much unemployment, terrible economic situation. That was around, now we're talking about 11 years from today. So what that woman did exactly, Al-Habsi, she formulated a professional community of practice in one of the remote schools in Oman again. What happened? That Omani Spring, it happened throughout the country, yes, but Muscat witnessed the lion's share. In the area where that woman comes from, there was very little echo of that. So what she was trying to do, remind those teachers that those Omanis used the social media to ignite the Omani Spring. And you teachers, you professionals, why should you be different? You also need to use social media to ignite democratic professionalism in your school, using your students and their parents, using the thick version of democracy, the strong version of autonomy. So, her intervention aimed at promoting collaborative pedagogy and reflective practice, two noble principles and values. In fact, the BES calls for. She wanted to give teachers, students, and parents voice, very much like what the other 2, 3, 4, 5 researchers did before. We had Al-Rawahi who did the same. We had Al-Jabri who did the same. Al-Ma'mari did the same. So why Al-Habsi should be different? After all, she's my supervisee. She's being fed the same principles, the same knowledge, the same values, the same morality, the same ethics. She wanted to change teachers' beliefs about that local version of continuous professional development, the utterly useless version, and revolutionize their practices and their students' learning. She also wanted to unite the teachers, the students, and the parents under the umbrella of democracy. There you go. Yes, what a huge umbrella that can accommodate all these groups, fortunately enough. She wanted the voices to be one voice against marginalization, exclusion, discrimination, oppression of rights, corruption, exploitation, and power concentration. She also wanted to prepare intellectual leaders, as in those teachers at that time, students for the future, parents forever, and put back credibility and accountability into teachers' work. Not only that, even into the BS. We said earlier that some people, many people actually, are questioning the efficiency of the BS. Why do we have it? What good is it doing for us? Well, al-Habsi had that in mind and wanted to achieve that, wanted to polish the image of the BES, make it shine, make it prosper, and decentralize ELT. Because this is what the BES is about. It's about decentralization, basically, not power concentration. She also wanted to remind all those groups about the critical role of technology, what we talked about earlier, in initiating and driving the Omani Spring a few years back, and how it forced the government. When we had the Omani Spring, when it ignited and everybody could see the effect, Sultan Qaboos those days and his corrupted government, actually those days, started to respond to the needs and the wants and the voices of the people who were on the roads, protesting against corruption and exploitation and marginalization, and you name it, all those bad things together. And they had to submit to those people's demands. They couldn't say no. Now, let's draw our conclusions. We're coming to the end of the talk. So, number one, the MOE practices affected nationalism and nationality, created social and economic hierarchy amongst the Omani people, actually. What a shame. Their practices also deprive teachers and students from developing as critical thinkers. We don't have critical thinkers in Oman, terribly few, because of neoliberalism and the practices of the MOE. Also, the adoption of neoliberalism caused unemployment in Oman. So that was all a bunch of lies. When the Minister of Education appeared before the public, before the people, and told them that this new BES, as we economize it, we're going to guarantee prosperity for you. A bunch of lies. These people, the 9 researchers, fascinatingly enough, they proposed imaginative, local, contextualized, and strategic solutions to Oman's problems. They bridged the policy practice gap in Oman and even beyond. Now, I'm sure you are starting to relate to the findings of this study and thinking about your own context. This is the idea behind today's study, ladies and gentlemen. The talk today is for you to reflect on critically, to be able to develop that kind of reflexivity as well, and see how you can take from today's work and be able to integrate it within your own work inside the classroom and beyond with your society. These 9 researchers created their own version of the Omani Spring. They didn't go out on the roads protesting. They used research to tell the community and the society by large, the voice of research is very scientific, very logical, very critical, very valid, and very reliable. Use it and it will change your torrid status quo. That was their way to protest against injustice in Oman, against the lack of democracy. They went public, but they're in their own right. They use scientific and critical research as a form of technical discourse to protest against dominance and the policy pandemic of the neoliberal reform that has been widely spread in Oman and beyond. Brilliantly enough, they used research to awaken teachers to their professional rights. Teachers are still unaware. But what these people did was to awaken the teachers and get them to move from awakening to attainment, to achievement. Those teachers were totally unaware of that. They also challenged the MOE. They built alliances and communities with those 3 underprivileged, marginalized groups of people to give them voice, critical voice, not any voice, scientific voice, not any voice, about the lack of democratic teacher professionalism and what it means to be powerful, to be empowered. Beautifully enough, they built alliances with each other. You remember earlier when I said that Al-Ma'mari built on Al-Jabri's and Al-Rawahi's thesis. They were building alliances amongst themselves. Each one of them was trying to tell everybody else that the work you initiated, I'm going to validate now and make it even stronger and more reliable. This is amazing, isn't it? When you have this kind of awareness, when people look at things from such a critical perspective and think critically about their actions and behavior, what more could you ask for? Those 9 researchers adopted critical discourse analysis as a political discourse to resist and challenge and protest against corruption, exploitation. Look at all those words. Not only that, but add a new research direction to the College of Education at SQ. Remember earlier I said that research at my college lacks criticality, lacks radicalism, lacks pragmatism. These 9 researchers turned the table upside down. They introduced something that nobody else before managed to introduce. They had the balls to do it. Bravo to them. We all tip our hats for them. Fantastic effort. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been amazing audience. That's the best I can say. I hope that talk enlightened, inspired, educated, gave you some hints about what your role is actually, what your responsibilities are, how you can probably initiate your own reform, your own democratic teaching professionalism to make things improve, to make things take a better direction, to appreciate the role of critical research, appreciate the role of teachers as professionals, understand the true meaning of professionalism. The floor now is open for your comments, questions. Thank you so much.
Contemporary critical theory. You indeed reiterated an important postulate of contemporary critical theory that politics is pervasive, in the sense that politics has pervaded English language teaching too. You made us reconsider if democracy is a much used or ruthlessly abused word, but you went on ahead to show that research is our last resort to fix the issue of unprofessional English language teachers in the Sultanate of Oman and by extension worldwide. It is only by questioning that we can arrive at a conclusion on what is discussed so far. So the floor is now open to the audience, both online and offline, for questions on Professor Isa's reflection on the said topic.
Not to ask any questions means the talk was brilliant, but that's not true. That's subjective. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, there has to be something you want to say. If not a question, then a comment. Tell me you didn't learn anything from that. Tell me it was very bad. Well, I understand the cultural barrier here. I fully, totally understand that. But let's try to pull it down together.
So good afternoon, sir. How hard it was to manage both pandemic and neoliberalism over neoliberalism effects over the education as a teacher, sir?
Was that a question? I apologize because the voice was a little bit low. I couldn't get that. I'm sorry. Can you repeat it and make the voice a bit louder, please?
So the question is being typed out, so kindly bear with us.
I mean, I'm looking at the audience now, and each one is looking at his or her next door neighbor, and without asking anything, without commenting on anything. This is fascinating.
So the question has been posted in the chat box. The question is, sir, are you there?
Well, they seem to be very happy.
Using the Western techniques of evaluation.
Sir, is the question visible to you? It has been posted in the chat box.
So there's a question in the chat box.
Yes, sir. Should I
Okay,
read it
I'll check
out?
this out. Let me check it out then. How hard is it to manage pandemic and neoliberalism effects over education as a teacher? Oh yeah, well,
National Academy.
terribly hard. Absolutely hard. Especially when you have two evils combining.
Culturally.
And when we talk about two evils, we are talking about COVID and neoliberalism. It is very hard, but look, probably that's not relevant because we all know that it is hard. The answer is very black and white, very straightforward. But what makes it interesting, exciting, and appealing is to be able to find an answer to this. And I already gave an answer in my talk when I said, researching teachers, we need to pursue research. Only through research, but then not any research, critical action research. This is what we are desperate for. This is what each and every teacher needs to pursue, to be able to move so many steps closer to our students, to our peers, to our colleagues, to our administration, to our curriculum, to everything. And then be able to bridge all those gaps, be able really to bash the pandemic, which is, thank God, phasing out now gradually. I don't know what the situation is like in India. And then also be able to bash neoliberalism at the same time. Lovely. Okay, we have another question. Keep bringing them on. Thank you so much. Okay, what is the whole point of accreditation using the Western techniques of evaluation and education in order to be a part of the international academia, when culturally the students of second language are oblivious to such education systems and learning practices? What a fantastic question. Thank you so much for whoever asked that question. Brilliant. Lovely. Let me tell you then, in Oman, where I work, Sultan Qaboos University, it is actually the only public university in Oman. And it was named after the former Sultan. Because it carried his name, he cared so much about transforming it into an international, and I'm stressing the word international, university, institution. So he gave his directions to the administration of the university. I want this university to be internationally recognized. How can we do it? Because as I said, we have been a de facto colony. We have been self-marginalized. We immediately ran to the Americans and sought their help. We thought that by importing their standards, their outcomes, it will raise the world rank of SKU. And it turned out to be a mistake, a huge mistake. Not only that, it's a fallacy, actually. Nobody believes in this now anymore. Yet, people are pushing for it because they have already, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, invested millions of US dollars in this. The Americans are winners, the Omanis are losers. That's simple. We have invested so much. No, we have not invested. We have wasted our financial resources following a dream, not even a dream, an illusion, actually. I hope I've answered the question. Thank you very much. Any more?
Democracy.
Thank you so much for the explanation, sir. We have
Linguistic democracy. in
two more
ELT.
questions, so it's been timed out. Just a minute.
In ELTR.
I'm just curious about the audience. Do we have students here, or do we have a combination of students and teachers?
So we have a combination of students, teachers, and research scholars.
Beautiful, lovely. I mean, I could tell the students from the ages. Nobody has got any white hair, so you can tell they're students, and teachers are full of gray hair. So simple maths. Okay, a third question. What pedagogy can you possibly suggest to decolonize linguistic imperialism and bring about subjective linguistic democracy in ELT? Beautiful. What a terrific question. Thank you so much. Well, I said it earlier, ladies and gentlemen, critical pedagogy. Pedagogy of the oppressed. You will find a lot written on that online. My advice to you is go online, Google it, and you will find hundreds of articles, hundreds, if not thousands, of blogs that discuss critical pedagogy. Read about it, educate yourself further, and see what implications it can have to your context, how you can implement it, and what results you can get from that. Research it, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, sir. There's another question posted.
Yeah, what is your take on the notion that political influence on various sectors like education, agriculture, etc.? Well, I'm against it. I'm against it. But then it doesn't mean that you cannot coexist with this. You can. You need to compromise. If it works on a 50-50 agenda where you coexist, where both parties compromise, where both parties sit, discuss, deliberate, collaborate, things can improve. You need better listeners. You need better negotiators. You don't want manipulators. You don't want people selling you illusion. You want people working for the good of the country. If you can find these and achieve that, definitely things will improve. There are so many countries around the world which have economized, politicized agriculture, economy, medicine, you name it. And they're doing pretty well. They're doing pretty well. All right, that's the next question. What are the new current theories for research practices in ELT? Critical literacy, critical education, critical applied linguistics. Look, I wouldn't call them new. I would call it a paradigm shift and research. This is what we need as researchers today. Shift the paradigm into something that would really bring us a new and a different perspective on looking at things, on looking at ELT, basically.
Thank you very much, sir. Kudos to your talk. That was in fact an eye-opener on the educational policies which should be parent suggested. And Education Society at the doorstep was a new initiative, a scheme which was recently introduced here in Tamil Nadu, India. But let's see if the system can bring in the radical and critical transformation that we're talking about. And not many of the stakeholders understand what damage their brain can subject us to. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
We shall now move on to the next session by Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan, sir. But before that, I'd like to remind the audience that the feedback link has been displayed on the screen as a QR code. It will redirect you to the online feedback link. Please do scan it and post your feedback.
Thank you very much for everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. It was
Thank
a
you.
great pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks. See you soon again, inshallah. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
The next guest we have amidst us is a very remarkable person and an admirable scholar, a teacher who is loved by all. It's none other than Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan, Professor in English in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. He is a practicing poet, motivational speaker, reviewer of books, and a yoga enthusiast. I hope you've heard this already from Vinod sir. He earned his PhD in popular fiction and the use of history from Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. He was a fellow at the School of Criticism and Theory at Cornell University, New York in 2008. He is also a recipient of a bronze medal for poetry at the National Library of Poetry, USA. His poems have been archived and widely anthologized. He is the author of Indian classics in English translation and has co-authored a book on literary theory. He is also the general editor of the 12-volume Encyclopedia of World Mythology in Malayalam. His articles have appeared in numerous journals and newspapers, such as Journal of Creative Communications, Journal of Dharma, Journal of English Language Teaching, the Indian Express, and many, many more. His research interests include somesthetics, politics of representation, film studies, life writing, and narratives about India. Currently, Vinod sir is working on the role of the public intellectual and the future of the humanities. I request Vinod sir to take over the session featuring the topic Digital Anxieties of the English Teacher. Over to you, sir.
Sir, kindly unmute your mic, sir.
So kindly unmute yourself. There's a mic icon on your screen, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My talk, I don't propose to speak for a very long time. I know most of us are approaching lunch, and this is about anxieties. My talk is about digital anxieties of a teacher of English. So I would be exposing a few slides which capture some very interesting developments in the world of technology. And a teacher who is not aware of the impact these technologies can have on the students or on the stakeholders is likely to miss out on so much as an enabler of language and language learning. My talk proceeds from a typically traditional model of teaching through technology to a position where we would have to reflect quite openly and with more minds coming together as to what are the options before us as teachers and the learners of language. Let me share with you my screen, and I will bring on these slides. I would request the organizer to let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Hello? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is on the screen?
Just a minute, sir.
What does it say?
You're not able to see your screen, sir.
Okay, so I think you must enable my screen sharing. You should enable this facility for screen sharing.
That's done, sir.
Okay.
Sir, can you reshare it, please?
All right. Yeah.
Sir, we made you the co-host. I think you'll be able to do. Yeah, thank you. We see it now.
Right. So this is my talk, and I
You see your screen and your audible, sir.
yeah, we begin our discussion at this point, which is the Renmin University in China. it's supposed to be an old 85-year-old university where the student enrollment is somewhere around 30,000. Now, I have put this picture of Renmin University here for us to know about a very interesting ritual in that university, which is called the Friday Corner. Now, there is a square in the university campus where the students gather on Friday evenings to have English conversation. So they pick their conversation partners at random and they proceed to practice English conversation. Now, I thought we can begin our story here, which is how a typical English classroom has been till very recently, where there is a teacher who animates a conversation in the class with the students. And this picture and the reference to the English corner, I have taken from a book that was published in 2010 by Robert Macron, and it's called Globish. It talks about the rise of English as the world's language. Now, the importance of English as a world language is still there, but we as teachers have to now contend with some very interesting developments, technological developments, and I thought as teachers, we need to be aware of their impact in the classroom. So I will start with a facility called WhatsApp, through which it's possible today to send a message, which is what I would call a composite medium. We would be able to see words. There is the verbal medium. We are able to see the cartoon figures, which is the visual medium. We are able to see the use of an emoji. And then there is also the manipulation of color codes. And so we are now confronted with the possibility of technology making communication a more multimodal affair. You have not just, maybe it is also possible to embed a little music and bring on a soundtrack with the conversation, or a speech or text-to-speech technology that would read aloud even as you scan the words on the screen. And this would show us a change that is coming to the way we communicate. It is no more the monochromatic, linear manner in which we were communicating. It is possible to bring into play new, more mediums, like say the visual medium, in addition to the verbal medium, and enrich the interaction in the class. Now, one would have to work, because we would also see that this message here, this passage, has a pun on the word agriculture, and which also points to the creative use of language. What makes this message interesting is the fact that it also communicates its message through the use of a pun, which can be seen as a demand on the teacher to be a little creative in the use of language, not simply be proficient, but also be able to bring on the different moods that one would require to demonstrate the play of language in everyday life. So with a technological facility like a WhatsApp message that in fact empowers the learner these days, because the children are digital natives. The parents are, or even the teachers don't belong to this generation. So we would see that the students take to these facilities better than the teachers. And so there is a little bit of catching up to do as far as the teacher is concerned. And the fact that the student in this regard is a little more equipped to handle technology can cause a little anxiety in the teacher. And that is my first point. I move on to a different situation. This is a 2015 film called Ex Machina, a science fiction film. And the person, the young man seated in front of the humanoid, is Caleb Smith. And we are looking at a scene in which the humanoid, which is supposed to be a machine, which is a non-human, has been developed in a controlled environment, in a system, to be so communicative that the machine is able to move the young man, influence him emotionally, overpower him emotionally, and even manage to get the master code by which it manages to escape the system. Now, I'm imagining if we have come to a pass in our destiny as English teachers, as teachers of language and learners, where we have perhaps reached a point where we are no more in control of the system. Perhaps it's the system that is now manipulating us. I would like to ask, if we have reached a situation where language as a system has completely overpowered us, and if we are today not responding to the demands of the language. Now, this is a shift in emphasis from maybe a situation where we could imagine that we were in control of the language. You could think of a master of language, a master of public speaking, a master of writing. So we had an idea of mastery. But given the explosion of knowledge, given the proliferation of technology and the way in which language is now mediated through technology, have we reached a system where we have sort of slipped from that position of mastery, and we are now trying, we are at the mercy of this system? And that is a thought that I have, and I would be very happy to hear if others also share this anxiety that I have. Now, my third frame is related to the earlier point, and we're talking about yet another humanoid, and this time the humanoid is Sophia. And Sophia is a social humanoid robot which was developed by the Hong Kong-based company Hanson Robotics. And in 2017, 1 year after this humanoid was developed, the Saudi Arabian government gave it a citizenship. Now that is a paradigm shift in man's relationship with a machine. Earlier, we could talk about a device as assisting us, maybe a word processor assisting us, or a dictaphone assisting us, recording what we speak into it and playing back our audio track. But today we are in interaction with humanoids. And strangely, this humanoid is the first to even receive a United Nations title. And the company has developed 8 other Sophias, and there is also a little Sophia today which teaches children how to code, and it teaches them Python. So we are looking, and the Sophia that we see on this picture has enough speech synthesis technology that it is able to have a reasonable conversation. In fact, a conversation much better than most people would be able to have with their fellow conversationalists. And we have reached a stage, some of us may even want to dismiss this development as a chat box with a human face, and that is the kind of criticism Sophia has received. But I thought if we can push our imagination, we would be able to see a scenario of an English class in which there is a humanoid that is communicating with us, a humanoid that is programmed with the curriculum, the latest delivery modules, and then very tirelessly, this humanoid is able to interact with the class. And while our muscles might become tired and we might drop a smile after a few minutes of engagement in the class, this is a machine that can be programmed to be consistently engaging in a class. So we might even have a situation where learners would prefer to spend time with a humanoid in the class learning language. We already do that in the language lab, locked in our very private cubby holes. And so if there is a humanoid which comes very close to a human being, and given the way technology is developing, we might have some humanoid which has skin as real as a human skin, so you could touch it, you would be able to talk to it, and it would engage you in a much more sophisticated manner than a human being in the classroom. I'm worried about very well financially disposed managements, educational services that would want to have a humanoid like Sophia just because they think that their human animators are not as good as the machine. And I thought that being the scenario in the not too distant future, it should fill a language teacher with some amount of anxiety. Let me quickly move on to our own attitude. It is interesting to see how we have evolved as consumers of digital technology. Today, we may not want to trust our co-passenger, a human being who might say turn left or turn right, but we would trust a Google map because behind the interactive voice, we even assume that it is a real human being, though most of us know it's a machine that's talking to us. It's a speech synthesizer that is using the voice of a Paul or a Mary or somebody very sweet and talking to us, even filling our imagination with very pretty human beings with whom we want to spend more time, or maybe continue the journey so that we can listen to these directions from the machine. But in that, let us also see how much we have yielded space to the machine. We are able to implicitly obey the directions of the machine because we trust that this machine has more eyes in the skies in the form of the satellite. And so its directions are calibrated to the centimeter that you cannot go wrong arriving at your destination. And so today we have even supplanted, at least as far as the interactive map is concerned, drivers have supplanted their human co-passengers with interactive maps in which there is a disembodied voice that is commanding them. And this to me is another scenario of the future where there could be a teacher with an interactive voice, a disembodied teacher who might come to the class through a very fine audio system, a very sophisticated audio system, and engaging us with a very well-planned, choreographed affair of 50 minutes of learning. And when done well, it could probably be as engaging as going on a journey, trusting your Google map and the interactive voice. Now, this is an assignment which I gave to one of my groups doing creative writing. And we are able to see that children can improvise because they are more technologically savvy than their teachers. And so they would be able to synthesize, simplify a book of about 300, 400 words in about 3 minutes or 4 minutes and give us the gist of a book, a novel. And I thought, isn't that going to be a different kind of a demand on the teacher, that we may have to develop technological smarts that would enable us to bring to the class modules that the student is able to relate in a much better way. And this is done in a span of just 1 month by our students. And it's a small group of about 3 or 4 in the creative writing class that decided to work on this. And then that particular batch submitted something like 54 such modules. And one can imagine that if, and we already have learning platforms like Byju's and Vedanta, which are doing precisely this in the sciences by developing modules which have a 3D visualization, and they are far more engaging. And I thought the human interaction is just an appendage there, but at least the saving grace in Byju's and Vedanta is that the student gets to interact with a human teacher. But we would have a situation where in a flipped classroom situation, the part of the curriculum could be delivered in the form of videos and modules that have been developed, or even assignments could be developed in this manner. And then teachers might have a problem deciding as to how to evaluate them, aggravating the anxiety that they would have. Now, my next slide is about writing. I thought that is the most fascinating exercise that a teacher can have in the classroom, but it is also the most frustrating. Even great writers wouldn't say that they enjoy writing. They would be passionate about writing, but it comes with a lot of physical pain. For an instance, an illustration, let me give you the example of Orhan Pamuk, the Turkish Nobel Prize winner. Orhan Pamuk works on his writing skills something like 10 hours a day. So every day, come rain or high waters, Orhan Pamuk is at his writing desk and he is practicing writing. So like an athlete, like a gymnast, like a musician, and a writer works at his craft. And it is precisely this skill that teachers presume to improve in students through some strategy or the other over a period of 10 hours or 20 hours. And I thought the results are not likely to be very exciting. And it is exactly at this time that we are faced with an even bigger problem. What we see on this screen is an interesting love letter. And let me read out this love letter to you. It says, "My love." So very straight to the point. There is no need to equivocate when you are in love. You say whether you are in love. And this letter comes straight to the point. It says, "My love, Chandan, from the day I met you until now, we never stayed away from each other. I don't know how it's possible, but maybe it's possible in love. There is no single day that I did not meet you and move hand in hand on the beachside together." So you need to have be by the sea in order to enjoy this scene. Now I think it is the testing phase God has put us into to realize how great we love each other. So love is not all honey and milk flowing all the time. It has its own trials, and one will have to rough it out in love. I'm sure that it would be with a blink of an eye that we would overcome this time. So when you are truly in love, maybe these things don't really matter. Sweetheart, that's very interesting. You need some term of endearment. In our stay together, there might be situations where I would have hurt you, but that was not intentional. And moreover, my heart will be broken when you are hurt, and my heart weeps a lot when you cry with your eyes. You see how beautifully, how effusively, as if this is an overflowing heart, you have words pouring out. And if we were asked to write a love letter in the class, how many of us would be able to pour our hearts out like this, even if the teacher assures you that he or she is not going to read your letter? I promised you that I will not be able to stay away from you for longer duration. Now you can tell me that you don't write love letters these days like this on a sheet of paper in longhand. You would type it out as a message through WhatsApp on some device and post it, right? Share it on the instant with your love. But let me now tell the group that this is not written by a human being. This is a machine-generated love letter. So what can we then teach our children? I thought the only means by which, or the excuse for us to have an interaction in the class, is that we would have a space to try out the different emotions. We would be able to express a need. We would be able to express our gratitude. We would be able to express our frustration or our anger, our displeasure or our joy. And it is this free flow of emotions that we are able to couch in words and then arrange them in very interesting combinations that really makes our speech and writing exciting. But now look at this situation. Our only chance of being human is now usurped by a machine that is an idiot because it only responds to an algorithm. And then there are these very meaningless mathematical algorithms that simply don't make any sense to anybody, but then they are, as output, able to generate these love letters. Hello? Now, I just, this one, hello? Hello? I just want to imagine the situation of a writing coach in the classroom. Now, what would that person be able to do when his or her expertise is threatened by a machine, which is most likely to be hijacked by a machine? And I thought anybody in that situation is likely to suffer from a certain anxiety of being upstaged by a machine. And in certain respects, the machine is able to turn out a phrase that is even more delectable than what the human mind can turn with its beautiful imagination. Yes, and on to very serious technological developments is that you don't even need very well developed organs of speech, like say the parts for articulating sounds. You don't require that today. We have the eloquent case of Stephen Hawking, one who suffered from a rare disease, the Lou Gehrig's syndrome, otherwise called the arterolateral sclerosis. And so somebody who was paralyzed from the neck down, but fortunately for the world of science, this genius was able to move through twitches a couple of muscles on his cheek, and then he was also able to move his eyelids. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology managed to develop a speech synthesizer that could be operated through laser arrays, and they in turn would be responsive to the different twitches or the manipulations of the muscles by Stephen Hawking, and through that he would move on, help the cursor move to his chosen words and pick words to compose sentences, and thereby those sentences would then be converted into speech, and so his text became his voice, although they were basically a synthesizer standing in for the voice of Stephen Hawking, but that is how he managed to deliver all his great lectures and make his unique contribution to the world of science, in fact, expand the horizons, literally the horizons of our knowledge about where we have come from and where we are going. And what we need to know from the case of Stephen Hawking is that today chip technology is assisting speech scientists in such a way that we would be able to have assistive devices that would help us put together human communication through a machine, even when large parts of the human system are not in a position to carry out the speech making, language making process. So I thought this technology holds a lot of hope for those who suffer from certain disorders and impairments, and we can look forward to a future where what we imagine can also be converted into text. Now, that is not science fiction I'm sharing with the group. It is what Michio Kaku, one of the leading physicists in the world, declared to a group of scientists, that the technology is near at hand when we would be able to download the ideas imagined by an individual. So we are very near cracking or crossing that threshold when a machine would be able to download the ideas in the mind. So a stage where there would be no more secrets for humanity. Now imagine this machine in a classroom where a student doesn't even have to write his answers on a sheet of paper for the teacher to bring on that dreadful red pen to say a grammatical error here, a spelling error there, a usage problem here, a structural problem there. All you would need is a machine that would be able to download the response and give an answer in real time or evaluation in real time. And I don't think teachers of language are going to celebrate that breakthrough in technology. Now, this is another citadel which is breached by technology. Many of my students would, on the first day, stand up and tell me that they only have two kinds of problems, one of them being English grammar. Now, I don't know if they really understand English grammar. I can openly declare that I don't know all of English grammar. So, but I thought both the confused learner and the incomplete teacher can meet halfway on YouTube, where in 0.62 seconds, that is not even a full second, you have on your screen something like, God knows how to even count that, 10 crore 80,000, 10 crore and 80,000 videos on English grammar that gets downloaded. So we can imagine the amount of empowerment that has come to the language learner, in fact, to the fingertips of the language learner. And that kind of empowerment must be approached with a certain calculated attitude by the teacher. Now, this is the environment, learning environment in which we are located. So we don't have the earlier unequal power system in which there was a learned teacher and the eager learner, but we have a situation where potentially the resources for learning are available in equal measure both to the teacher and the learner. And so we would need to see the situation with a different attitude. Of course, as a teacher, I would feel a little overwhelmed by these options that are there, both for the teacher and the student. And one would want to wonder as to what one can possibly do in the English grammar class. So you have the same for speech. If you want to have videos on public speaking or how to be a more confident speaker of the language, then in less than a second, almost half a second, you get so many thousand videos. One lifetime is not enough. A few lifetimes are not enough. Even if you live up to 100 years and 8 hours a day, it's not enough to watch all these videos. But that is the wealth, the abundance of material resources that are available around this. And I don't know whether we should see it as riches or riches that will spoil us. The jury is still out there, as they say. And now this is another development which has come with technology. One does not have to be in a classroom. There could be a lecture delivered, but if there is somebody recording it, and that can be provided to somebody who could not turn up for the lecture. So we are now moving from one paradigm of language learning, which is maybe, there was a time when more of our senses were engaged. You had to look at the teacher, you had to look at the book, you could read, and then you had to listen to the teacher, you had to write down something. So the body's organs were engaged, the senses were engaged, more than one sense was engaged at any given point in time. But when you look at the slide, we are in a situation where one does not have to look at anything. Now, I don't know if that is good news or bad news, because you learn a language by listening to the audio track. And I don't know if that is enough for us to have a fair appreciation of the emotional content, the tonal variation, and then also to be able to see how that translates into everyday action. And I suppose we should be able to continue our research to be able to decide whether the lack of the visual engagement in the learning of language is impaired by our focus on just the auditory mode of learning. Now, that is a point that we can debate. This is another development which can once again cause anxiety to a teacher of writing, because I think it is possible that some of us speak better than we write. In fact, we are reluctant writers. Even the better students in class who perform well on their writing exams would still prefer to speak. And if the administration offers an option to evaluators that they would be able to complete an evaluation without the student having to write, I like to take the guess that most students would sign up for a speech to text kind of examination, where all you have to do is show up at a studio at the appointed time, you speak out your answers, and that is converted into text, which will be printed out at a remote location or at the office of the evaluator. A person can even provide the answers from his the comfort of his room. Now, this situation is also, I don't know, reducing the horizon of language learning, because we might be able to speak into our microphones and then have the text on the screen, make the changes, the editing work, and then send it to the evaluator. So that's a technology that we need to contend with. Now, I found another interesting phenomenon. While we speak in a classroom where we are physically present with the students, they are able to understand us. The interaction is more effective because there is the body that comes into play. In fact, a more effective component in language delivery. Then the production of speech sounds, the movement of the lips, and so on, the orientation of the speaker towards the listeners. And all these do help in deciphering the text. But while delivering the online classes, I, to my horror, saw that most of my lectures were coming out with very strange words in the transcript. And that only told me that the online medium is so different from an offline medium. And one needs to make a lot of adjustments to the online medium. So I thought teachers would have to train themselves to be compatible, to be acceptable to the technological medium. And that, I thought, can cause a little anxiety to a teacher who thinks that it is not enough to merely be a speaker, but a speaker whose speech style is acceptable to the digital platform. Yes, and so what would language experts do if we have a technology that can give us real-time translation? You don't need an expert from one mother language to a target language. We have a device which can do a seamless translation, and I'm sure the translator would see that he is he is now becoming an endangered species. The same for writing. Today, there is an increased use of the keyboard, and we don't pick up the pencil. And I thought we are wasting a great skill. I like to think that writing with the pencil or pen on a sheet of paper, the longhand writing, the old style of writing, the old world of writing, engages us more senses and engages us in a more wholesome manner than typewriting. I like to think that writing is a skill that we have miraculously picked up. Imagine the amount of struggle we went through to train our body to pick up a pen or pencil, hold it between 3 fingers at an angle, and be able to move it across a page in such a way that we are able to make elegant strokes and make it also legible for other people to read. But in the process, we also were animating a yogic process, what I call a process in which one moment there is no shape to our thoughts, they are shapeless, they are a swirl of potential ideas in the mind. Then a certain idea takes shape in the mind. That idea gets structured into a sentence and it is still very invisible. And those sentences then travel from the mind through the body, and that is when it becomes somatic. And from a non-somatic entity, it becomes a very real entity that is now engaging the body, the nerves, the motor sensory mechanism. And then it comes to the fingertip where you're holding a pen, an instrument that can now bring it into reality, realize this idea. And I thought, what a great yogic skill it must be that we are able to command our mind to write a word, and then that word appears magically on the page. We are able to draw something, and then there is a figure that appears magically on the page. And I thought, and there are also experiences most of us have when we are down, agitated, despondent, feeling a little defeated or depressed. A sheet of paper and a pen, in order to pour out our thoughts, would bring a lot of clarity to our mind. Many of us feel so cleansed, as if there is a cathartic process that has been completed. And that is what the old style of writing can do. And that's why great writers still prefer to do their first drafts in longhand before they transfer it onto the screen. But then the next one is like a monkey that is drunk and it is now making merry with the keys on of the computer. And we have these letters jumping onto the screen. And I thought there are two different ways in which reality is constructed. There is a way in which the typewriter seems to be throwing up letter after letter, or clumps of letters onto the screen, and then you have sentences composed. While in the old style, you had to move painfully from the left to the right and then come back left to the right in a way in which we were training ourselves. So much so there is a certain muscle memory that teaches us to organize our thoughts, get it into a rhythm. And the second sentence is getting organized even as we write down and complete the first one. And I thought we need to examine the difference between these two approaches to writing. And what I would like to think at this moment is that there was a particular engagement of all our faculties in the old style of writing. It's a different engagement today. The value judgment must follow some hard research. I would like to take a position that the old style of writing, because it engages me in a wholesome manner, is that which keeps me more sane as a human being. But then the other one is technology that is too seducing, and sometimes I find myself yielding to that technological lure. This is another very strange, this is a very, very important aspect of language learning, which I think we may perhaps not be able to pick up if it is going to be with a machine. A human being is able to animate or respond according to the needs of another human being. There is an empathic wavelength in which communication happens. Now, one may not be able to have that kind of empathy from a machine. And where language is largely learned through imitation of better models, I like to think that with the machine coming into our lives more and more, we are perhaps losing this facility to learn by imitating the better models of language performance. Then one more development, and I think it is good, but it adds to the responsibility of language teachers, who now have to accept the fact that a lot of research is today happening in the field of large rubric of cognitive neuroscience, where the brain's parts, as we can see on the slide, are like identified as Broca's area, Wernicke's area, the left frontal lobe or the left temporal lobe. And then there is one area for speech production and articulation. There is another for language development and comprehension. Neuroscience would tell us that a certain amount of learning happens even before the child comes to the school. So there is preschool learning, years in which syntax and grammar are learned, whereas after coming to the school, the window of vocabulary development is open, and so that is an area where the child can hope to have some improvement. So I thought neuroscience is telling us that the language teacher will have to be far more equipped or informed to really sympathize with the needs of the language learners. And one cannot assume that it is only merely a language-related problem that we need to deal with. There are cognitive aspects which would require us to foray into neuroscience and read more on areas like parent-child interaction, on the need to read aloud, on face-to-face communication, on mimicry, and so on. This is not an exhaustive reference to neuroscience, but I can tell you off the cuff that one of my own colleagues in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences is doing some tremendous work in biolinguistics, in neuroscience, in the understanding of genetics and epigenetics in language learning. So Joseph Cornea is doing remarkable work in that area. And I thought his research is not meant to be confined to a small group of specialists, but I thought the spirit is to see that it's disseminated to the larger community of English teachers, so that we are able to approach teaching in a more empathic manner, understanding the neurobiology of language learning, which I don't think was a concern even some 30 or 40 years ago. So it's a new generation of learning and a new term that we have taken in research relating to language acquisition, language learning, and so on. Yes, we are today moving towards a situation where language can be built into us. At least when we look at how the teaching shops sell their language modules, there are a number of software that we can buy from the vendors, and who promises that we would be empowered by the resources that are provided by these software. But I thought we are all being turned into the characters as in Plato's cave, the prisoners who are chained and only get to see the reflection of the object on the wall of the cave. And unless we come out of the system, we are not able to see how imprisoned we are. And I thought we are perhaps in a situation like in Ex Machina, and as in Plato's Cave, as in the movie The Matrix, our thinking is completely imprisoned and controlled by a larger system. So maybe there are people who tell us that they have the control over language learning, and they take the grand position of deciding as to who is a learner and who is a teacher. They decide on a basic beginner level, on intermediate level, on advanced level, on most advanced level, and so on. So we are in a situation imprisoned by people who decide levels and standards for us. And as in the film The Matrix, we are all imprisoned by these regulators of our language imagination. Yes, and then the present generation knows that this is the new vocabulary. The old generation, stuck in their ways, is reluctant to allow this as part of the communication. But I thought we are heading towards a crisis where we may have to now see that our communication will be a hybrid of the verbal and the visual. So it is going to be words and emojis together. While there is a hybrid version for many things in this world, it is not too far in the future that we will be communicating. We are already communicating on WhatsApp with these and on Facebook with the hybrid facility of words and emojis. And so where does it leave the teacher? I thought we can be very honest about our position, accept our position that technology has actually equipped us. There is no need to be apologetic about it. And like any syllabus or curriculum declaring the components of a course, we can probably declare that we have gone online to source certain material for the class. And once we declare that, then I thought the interaction will be purely very contractual, very meaningful, and I thought on very clearly declared terms. And the teacher empowering himself or herself with the resources available on the net, and then communicating with a generation of learners which are a little more comfortable with technology. I thought it would require a little realignment and a little hard work on the part of the teacher in order to first get over this sense of overwhelming anxiety and then come to terms with the challenges in the field. And with that, I thought I will close my talk. In fact, I'm grateful to the few people I get to see on my screen who managed to put off their lunch in order to sit, at least, sit in front of a screen, listen to me. I wish I were there talking to you. Thank you very much. I'm done. If you are in a mood for any questions, I'll be happy to take them. I don't think I have the heart to ask you for questions because I can see that many of you are famished, hungry. You can almost smell your lunch from here.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful lecture, for giving us an outline of how technology has influenced education and brought about a paradigm shift in learning and understanding concepts. We do have one question from our student. I'm just reading it out. Sir, do you think writing poems in pen will be suitable for this era of technology, where everything is by means of cloud storage and Word documents? Won't it be difficult to transform written scripts to a soft copy?
Your question was not very clear to me. Can you just type out a few words? Maybe I'll get the question, the drift of the question.
So mentioned this speech to text,
Oh,
this writing to conversion.
yeah.
So what the intention of the question is, isn't the subjectivity of the whole emotion is lost when technology converts words which just leaves up emotions in totally.
I would, yeah, agree with you, but I thought we would also have a kind of, an artificial intelligence in which those lacunae can be taken care of. For instance, in speech, we modulate our voice in order to express our moods. And in writing, we have the modal verbs to tell us, give us some idea about these moods. And I thought we might attain to a certain sophistication of artificial intelligence where even that is picked up, very sensitively picked up by a machine. We could have very sensitive machines that are much better listeners, and maybe because it's all algorithmic, it would be able to decide at to what level the emotion of that person is communicated and identify it. So we might have a speech recognition technology that would also be able to catch the emotional variation in the speech of an individual. So it just might be as sophisticated as we can imagine.
Thank you, sir. But is it under current development? Is it under development such a technology which captures? Are you aware of anything?
You have to be louder and clear, please.
Just a minute.
Sir, the student asked whether such a technology is existing or is it under development?
Oh yeah, it is definitely no. In fact, many of the ideas that I shared with you have been in existence for some time, and they have been used with varying degrees of success. And the users are now able to provide feedback, which is helping the fine-tune these instruments. So we are already living with these machines. It's only that we are trying desperately to live alongside these machines and see that we are not completely effaced by these machines.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
I have a question, sir. It's more of a view. Sir, if robots or humanoid robots are given the place of a staff, wouldn't it be confusing for the students? And the other thing here is, if the student makes a mistake, what would be the response of the robot? Because the staff would react with a shout or might actually punish them, but then the punishments of the robots would be completely different because they don't have the human heart and the human emotions. This is one connotation, one part where the students will be very fearful of the humanoid robot. And my point of view of this question that I put out is humanoid robots might act as good tools more than good teachers. Because teachers are always teachers because they are just like us. They are our kind. They are humans. And robots might work as tools like we use PPTs today to bring a note of fun or a note of interest to the students. What is your view on this, sir?
Yeah, I would like to go with your idea that we should never be in a situation where a teacher is replaced by a machine. That is not because I'm a teacher myself and I would not want to see myself upstaged by a machine. I thought a lot of learning is like parenting, and there is so much about parenting that is common to teaching as well. And that's why in certain respects, at least in the language class, the efforts of the teacher come close to parenting because there is a lot of mimicking, there is a face-to-face communication, there is human interaction, there is a show of concern, and then there are needs that are sensitively addressed. And so to that extent, I thought a human teacher is quite responsive, and maybe a machine as it is obtained today is not so responsive. But I thought, going by the mentality of our administrators, and also by the fact that our world today is not guided by the ethics of those ethical considerations that will sustain humanity, but largely by financial considerations that always come down to the balance sheet, where you may have to show a return on investment. That being the case, we may have a situation where, rather than keeping 10 teachers on the payrolls, they would rather buy a machine one time, maintain it so that this machine can go on and on. And maybe there won't be any shouting or things like that. Or because, a teacher is an individual, but a machine is designed by a group of very intelligent people. And those are people who reduce a variety of human needs into algorithms. It's precisely that group which is able to make you buy a toothpaste when you don't need a toothpaste, which is able to make you buy a perfume when you really don't need a perfume, which is able to make you buy a soap when you don't really need a soap. Now, that's exactly how these machines are also constructed. They're constructed by a group which does its psychological needs analysis of a society and produce a humanoid, which maybe, it may not shout like our present teachers, because each teacher has a different style of shouting. But this machine would read the decibel levels or the disturbance levels of a class, and when it crosses a threshold, maybe even that humanoid might say, "Ladies and gentlemen, shut up," or whatever. But intelligent people will have an interesting way of making the machine speak and make these technologically tuned children to even obey those machines. They may not obey a human being who says, "Shut up, sit down, quiet, please, please, quiet." No, but maybe when a machine says shut up, they would probably want to listen to the machine.
So there is just one more question,
Please.
if you will. Does machine learning reduce anxiety, or does it trigger anxiety, especially with the Gen Z kids who have a short attention span and episodic curiosity, which diffuses every now and then?
So long as the machine is not sophisticated, it doesn't cause any anxiety, because you know that the human being can always find relevance in the class. And so when the machine is not sophisticated, we can always find our space and live as if nothing has changed. But the moment the machines become sophisticated, and they tend to become sophisticated because there is always a generation next that is going to improve on the earlier version. For every 1.0, there is a 2.0. So when that happens, and it inevitably happens, we would have to move towards a situation where we might even have to think about our relevance.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think we have come to the close of Q&A. Thank you very much for that engaging session which we had on digital anxieties. We love having you here, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I leave now?
Yes, sure, sir. The audience feedback.